presentation. We are concerned about federal money and federal projects, where these projects could implement or could impact us. And I'm sure that's a moving target. But I know you have presented on this before, and I even steal something. I won't steal your thunder, but please take it away.
Thank you. So for the record, Jana Morse, I'm the Director of Administration and Finance for the Agency of Transportation. So thanks for having me back in to talk about this particular topic. I have a couple of slides. I'm hoping that this is the same list that you've seen before. If it's not, figure it out. So over the last few months, you've heard testimony from the agency on our funding sources, which 44% comes from the Federal Highway Administration. You've been walking alongside us as we've been navigating and interpreting executive orders, have continued to deliver our capital program and manage flood recovery projects despite the uncertainty around the federal funding. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about where we are with each of the programs, our core programs and discretionary programs in particular. And the funds you see on this page are all part of our core highway program, which are business as usual. There's been no impact to these funds, and they've maintained flow since the election.
Representative Pouch?
Yeah, I appreciate you coming here. And so it says funding is secure. What really does that mean? Right now, there's nothing, or we've been told, don't worry about it, it's secure.
So this means that we have access to all of the funds that you see on the screen. We can obligate them. There's no restrictions. There's no potential for risk at all with them.
Okay, thank you.
So in the discretionary grant programs, this slide shows both the discretionary grants that the agency manages and some of the pass-through grants to municipalities.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, going back to the first page, so you said you have that much and so what is in the carbon reduction program, or is that money that's already been obligated that we used for the like head program in the public transit program?
I'm not sure specifically where those $4.3 million are allocated, but I can follow up with you on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It may be that it was the money that
The carbon reduction is the combination of the other allocation and the core programs that are here.
1 million,
Yeah.
I think for and something like 3 million for public transit.
For public transit.
It's my recollection, but I'm just curious.
We're actually meeting on that a little bit more tomorrow, so we'll answer your question after that.
I didn't hear.
So we're meeting a little bit more on that tomorrow, so I'll be able to answer your question
Oh,
after
okay,
that.
great.
Representative Pouch?
Yeah, does this include the public transit grant monies that come in for capital and whatnot?
If it's,
Are they in here?
if it's specific from FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, then no, this is specific to Federal Highway Administration.
Okay,
That's just
gotcha.
the bulk of our funding that comes in here.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I don't want to, that's why I said I don't steal something.
Discretionary grant programs, these are, some of these are managed by us. Some of them are managed by municipalities or third parties, and we're the pass-through for them. Others are city or other municipal projects that we actually provide support and management services for. So USDOT Secretary Duffy spoke in the Senate EPW committee last week on April 2nd, sharing that there were about 3,200 discretionary grants that were sitting on his desk when he came into office. So these do not have grant agreements yet, and he's been working through what the process is to analyze those and then be able to issue them. Some of these date as far back as 2022, according to his testimony in Senate EPW. So we've been working very closely with our Federal Highway Administration Division Office, which is located right here in Montpelier, to prepare to start working on several grant agreements. We've been hearing that some of them are moving. And there's been about 3 or 4 that we've heard that we should start preparing for, but they aren't able to tell us specifically which ones. So things are headed in the right direction for us with respect to receiving funding here. We have not put any of the projects that we're managing on hold. We have continued to advance the work, and if you have questions about specific ones, our chief engineer may be able to speak about where we're at with some of them, or some of the, any challenges that we might have run into, or the fact that we're just moving forward with them. And the money will be coming at some point. It's obligated, it's in the law, it's in the bill, and we're expecting that it's going to advance forward for us.
Yeah, it's helpful to have you here. So we had heard like that Winooski, the new Winooski Bridge I'm not sure if we heard it here or I heard it in the hallway or whatever. They said, oh, well, that's up in the air right now. What you're saying here, that's that raise grant, that's funded.
Yes.
Okay.
We have not been told otherwise that we will not receive funding for that program. So we are operating with the intent that we will be receiving the funding going forward.
So just to be clear, that's the full 24,800,000.
We have not received anything from USDOT or Federal Highways saying otherwise. So we are proceeding forward with the assumption we will receive the funds.
But with 4 million in hand.
We've already obligated 4 million. Yep.
Okay.
So sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Are we saying that your testimony on April 8th here is substantially different than it was on March 17th or 18th in terms of what was being under review and whatnot, since the Secretary of Transportation testified in the Senate, the US Senate, that things have changed very positively since a few weeks ago? Is that what we're?
I would say yes. I wasn't present for the testimony, but it was prepared and I was intended to deliver it. That would have been my message that was testified to. So yes, I would say that we have seen a lot of change in the last 2 weeks. And we've seen things open up and we've had some restrictions that have just been clarified to say, hey, you don't really need to worry about this much anymore in a few of our programs. So we're feeling much more confident that we'll be able to advance work as planned in most of the programs.
Is the NEVI money completely dead?
I don't know yet.
We don't know.
That's
There's still-
my last slide. You're stealing my thunder.
I said I was gonna steal your thunder, but Commissioner Corcoran is busy flipping back and forth the Senate presentation. And the Senate presentation, just even a little bit ago, was substantially different.
So in the Senate
Our
presentation, you might have seen the funding status was under review by USDOT and the dollar amounts minus the total obligated were in that right-hand column. And I realized that there is a typo in my presentation. It's both of those columns on this page. The last column should say total under review. These grant agreements are part of those 3,200 that are under review and that are being slowly moved out of the Secretary's office or USDOT or their supporting mode, depending on where the review it needs to occur.
So they're under review?
The grant agreements are under review. However, that's a typical process. Every grant agreement goes through the same review process and is signed and then moved forward.
I'm just saying it's almost like a conflict. If you get funding, it's secure, but it's gonna go through the
Just like all of our other grants.
essentially secure under review.
There has been no memo issued by USDOT or by Federal Highway Administration indicating otherwise. The only memo and the direction that we have received that funds are in jeopardy or funds are at risk is regarding the NEVI funds. So this is where we'll talk about the NEVI funds. And then the last page has the specific projects. So our earmarks, I feel like I'm going back a little bit. So if this is too much information, just let me know. Our earmarks are funds that have been specifically allocated through congressionally directed spending. They're specified in the appropriations bill, and as such, these funds are secure. Our general fund programs, our bridge program funding, those are not at risk either. The NEVI program guidance is under review, which I believe we've testified to previously. And the USDOT advises once new programmatic guidance is released, that states can update their NEVI plans and funding may still advance. So what we heard Secretary Duffy testify to, and again, this is USDOT Secretary, Department of Transportation, stated at Senate EPW last week, and I'm going to paraphrase, but I'm going to read from these notes. NEVI was appropriated by Congress, so DOT will implement the law. However, the department is rewriting the guidance because under the previous guidance, only 66 chargers were installed to date from the $5 billion of the $7.5 billion pot of funding that was set aside for charging stations. So again, this is Secretary Duffy's testimony at the Senate EPW. And he also stated that he will look at the guidance and make the guidance work. He stated he will do what Congress directed. So while that doesn't change what we have access to in our federal management information system, that's our financial system that gives us access to the federal dollars. Right now, those funds are listed as the category rescinded. So I'm giving air quotes because that's exactly how they're not available to us. But that doesn't mean that in the future, based on what we're hearing in his testimony, depending on how long it takes the new guidance to come out for the NEVI program, it doesn't mean that everything is completely off the table. Those would be the ones that the agency feels are most at risk right now. And that is $15.8 million.
And so, if it moves forward, there may be new guidance that may require us to sort of stop and look at, all the hoops and requirements in the previous guidance that we had to meet that might have to change.
That's correct. So we submitted a state NEVI plan based on the prior guidance. We may need to adjust that to work within the new guidance when it's released.
Is this the 90-day review or is this a different program?
I don't know how long it's going to take to do this review.
But wasn't there initially a review that had to happen within 90 days? Is this part of that money or not? Actually. So there was a 90 days up there somewhere.
Well, that was,
Not
I thought there was in relation to the
Yeah.
mileage-based user fee programming grant that we were, that said that we would know within 90 days while we were here on that. We'll phone a friend.
For the record, Patrick Murphy, my agency transportation, so the 90-day review is just for all the discretionary grants. The DEVI program is a formula funded program, and what the secretary has previously done is said that all of the plan approvals are suspended. And the plan approvals are what unlock the funding, basically. With some of these other programs, they have plans attached to them, but funding isn't contingent on plan approval. Here in this program it is. And so they've suspended the approval of the plans. And in doing so, allowed basically money to be withheld until they develop this guidance that will inform the new set of plans for the states.
So, not to beat a dead horse, but I think in the last week or two, when people have talked to me, I said, the NEVI funds are dead. We're saying they're not dead. They're just on life support, or they need to be, they're not dead.
They're not available to us right now, so we're not counting on them. But that doesn't mean that couldn't change in the future. We're really at the mercy of finding out what the new guidance will be.
Just to sort of follow up in that, the legislation came through Congress. The amount to spend came through Congress. Now what's happening are the rules associated with how the formula fund, so every state gets some. So it's not the amount, it's just, hey, what's your plan? We may have we have new rules now on how to spend it.
So our interpretation and some of the follow-up questions, the agency's interpretation, and some of the follow-up questions to USDOT Secretary Duffy in the Senate EPW were around the NEVI funds in particular. And he expressed that his intent is to deliver on what the Congress intent was. And the track record of delivering only 66 chargers, of which I should note Vermont has one of them, in the period of time that they had to do this is not very great return on investment. So it sounded like our interpretation of his testimony was that he would like to come up with a program that delivers faster or give Congress the money, the opportunity to redirect those funds. And that was about the 2.5 minutes that he responded to that particular senator's question.
Well, again, just sort of a follow-up, and I think I remember, we've been looking at this for a couple of years, and we were waiting for them to come up with the rules. And it took a lot longer. So once they did come up with the rules, it seems like we reacted in a reasonable amount of time.
We think so.
Yeah, okay,
Yes,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Representative Burke?
So I guess I missed what you said. The total award was 22,594,000. And the total rescinded is the 15. So what's the difference there?
So the difference is about $6.5 million. Part of that are funds that were already obligated to different projects, and the projects in particular, I realize these numbers don't line up. What you're seeing is that NEVI funds were the 8.6 here, but there's some other things that were in play, and I don't know if Patrick, you can speak a little bit more to that, or
And the other thing just about the rescissions is that, I mean, Congress appropriated or whatever they did, approved the money, but they're not taking responsibility for the things that they're doing. They're not taking responsibility for the money that they, I mean, I'm just a little bit suspicious that will Congress claim its authority in terms of appropriating. So just a question. I mean, if there, it would be nice if we got that money, it'd be great.
Other question? Burlington, that was on the hold list, the big bike ped over the road.
South
Burlington, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Those of us in Franklin County don't delineate between Burlington and South. Is that on this list here somewhere? And where are we with that?
It's the first two underneath the second section, and we're working on some obligation, but as far as the specific project specifics, I defer to the chief engineer.
Yes, Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer. So project is moving forward. As Gina said, we fully expect the grant to ultimately get executed. As you can see, the top grant, I believe, is executed, and then they needed some supplemental funding. And so that's the second grant there. So the project team's still moving forward. Anticipate advertising that project in May with an executed contract in June.
And on the other slide, more importantly, the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail and the Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail resurfacing.
Million, what the heck?
The Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail resurfacing project is all set and totally obligated, huh?
We are told the funding is secure. We have access to it.
They couldn't resist.
I didn't see anything about the D&H rail trail.
I didn't read that anything about the D&H Rail Trail either. Representative Tomlinson.
This is really helpful to hear this update and encouraging. Do you have any sense though on any anticipated changes to grants or FHWA programs that we should be anticipating?
We haven't received anything yet.
Representative Howe?
And this might be for Patrick, but the question is, when we look at the NEVI program, you see the one that's completed, and then are all the rest like just totally on hold, or does this show a couple of them are still moving forward?
So this does show that two additional are moving forward in addition to Bradford. We had some ARPA monies that were converted to general fund dollars, which you'll see on the right-hand side at the very last column of that screen, for both Randolph and Wilmington. So we were able to appropriate those funds specifically to advance those two projects. And then we don't have any additional ARPA converted to GF. So the remainder of them, the contracts have been on hold. We've communicated with the contractors for each of these projects. And until funds become available, we would not advance this work.
Right, but as of right now, we know Bradford's done. Randolph and Wilmington can continue to move forward.
Yes.
Have the other locations work has been done or not done in planning of these contractors that are listed? Did I hear that they had been doing work on these other sites in anticipation? So they have done work that they're not, may or may not be reimbursed for? Is that?
So any work that had been completed, we would not leave without being paid. My understanding, and Patrick can correct me if I'm wrong, is that for the awarded on hold ones, there may have been negotiations in progress for sites. There might have been some, discussions happening, but there weren't actual tangible work performed as far as like digging or site work, that type of thing. I believe the same thing might have been true for contracted on hold, but I defer, Patrick, if that's not accurate, to correct where I'm headed.
Yeah, so we went through towards the end of last year, solicitation process, we made awards. I think it was in October. We, Randolph, Wilmington, were ones that we had worked more quickly to meet ARPA deadlines that were attached to them at that point. So that's why they had progressed more quickly in the contracting process. But by the time plan approvals had been suspended by the secretary. We had a couple more contracts in place, but no work had been begun. Folks have 60 days to identify a site host and get that site under agreement before moving forward with the environmental reviews and the right of way certification that we would need to make the next steps towards construction. So no work was done that hasn't been reimbursed.
They were vested in terms of their planning, bidding, their work on that side, but actual troubles in the ground or anything like that or buying it.
Right.
But there was a certain amount of planning and good faith effort that they had been through. Okay, when you say general fund money, are we saying that we're using our general fund money to make our Vermont contractors whole because the thing is on hold? Or is that saying it's money that was already planned to use both NEVI and converted ARPA that was already part of the plan? We didn't make an adjustment out of somewhere else in the money to pay these Vermont contractors.
We converted the ARPA money to be able to use it for this.
We would already plan to do that. That wasn't a new step that we had to do to keep Vermont vendors whole. It was something that was already the way it was scheduled to be handled.
Yes,
One difference is that two of these projects had some NEVI funds attached to them. And so we had 3 projects that we were going to do with ARPA funds that each had a little bit of NEVI funds with them. And so we, in order to be able to actually make some progress now, we've removed those NEVI funds from the 2 projects just to be able to
Keep moving.
Yeah, I'm just, the ARPA funds, I'm just more curious about the process. Was it, just the timeline, wasn't it in December? That you had to sort of obligate those or expend those, and if you didn't, you had to sort of drop it to the bottom line so you could expend them in the out years? So I'm assuming this was done in December, right?
they were all obligated, I think, by the end of October. We had
October, December, whatever.
internal.
But I'm just saying, so we knew we had this money and we had, when you guys were in here before, this never showed up. So if that money was there in October, I'm just wondering why we just see it.
Because each of those projects also had NEVI funds attached to them.
Yeah,
So until we were able to work with those contractors to revise the contracts, they were also fucked because they had federal funds that had been suspended within the contract.
all right, I was just wondering about the process. All right. All right.
so that's all I have for an update.
After some tough afternoon testimony, we end on a good note. Is that what this is a positive, far better than it was picture of 2 weeks ago.
And
3
it's
weeks
a
ago.
lot different than where we were when we came into the beginning of session as well, with the, lack of understanding of really what the impacts were going to be. Really feeling like we didn't have a clear picture that we could articulate to you, and I feel like it's a complete, 180 today.
Without trying to minimize the importance of this piece, that's not right. So I wanted to make sure that didn't come off that way. This is very frustrating for a lot of what the policy has been done in this committee. But the bigger picture of the whole overall program is much more positive than when we first got here. So I don't want to feel like I was dismissive of the people that have worked hard for this particular piece. So. Representative White?
Thank you for this update. And yeah, it's nice to see a little positive news. So this information is really different than what's on the JFO website. And I guess I had thought that was dynamic, but it looks like that was a presentation that you and Michelle Blumenauer did on March 18th. So what's the best way for us to be keeping informed of federal funds? Will that be updated on the JFO website, or will you all be providing another update?
We can certainly provide additional updates. Is the 18th the same version of this, just with, is it the look and feel look the same?
It's the look and feel, but the designations are different because a lot of this was under review by DOT
Right.
as opposed to secure.
So this page should look completely different from.
Total at risk. Yeah.
Yes, the total, the funding status and the total under review versus total at risk should be the significant differences, right? Yeah. So we can
Yes, that whole
certainly,
second part from the 18th was under funds under review by DOT. So, funding is secure.
It's like a little bit of semantics sometimes of, it's secure, it's still under review by the DOT, but the security is there for us. So. And that review is not any different than any other year where the same process occurs with grant agreements.
So
Yeah, it's not a normal year.
So again, we should not be looking at the joint fiscal office. We will rely on you all to keep us updated as things change.
And we're certainly happy to provide another update. I respectfully don't know how often the JFO updates their content, and sometimes it's reliant on our testimony or documents that we might produce for days like today. So we're certainly, we can come back in another couple of weeks. We can simply provide an update to the chair and vice chair and let you know when something has changed, and funnel that through Patrick or through another mechanism. But yes,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you very much, and we are adjourned for